And for more, I'm joined by Eric Mandel, founder and director at Middle East Political Information Network and senior editor for security at the Jerusalem Report. Thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.
So what exactly can we expect from this meeting, this renewed bilateral relationship between Trump and Netanyahu?
So first of all, we should not underestimate the symbolism that Bibi is the first foreign leader who's going to meet with Trump. And I think that's very important. But there's that symbolism. Now we get to the tangible things that need to happen. President Trump is very clear, and he's made it very clear, that he wants not that this temporary ceasefire to evolve into a phase 2, maybe a phase 3, permanent ceasefire, which in essence would mean Hamas remains in power, which means that Bibi's coalition could fall, because they don't, the hard right wing does not even want it to get past the 42 days after phase 1. So the question is, what would Bibi be able to get if he withdrew the troops, if he got all the hostages, which I don't believe that he'll be able to do? Would it be some type of quid pro quo for a deal regarding Iran? I don't believe the president, Trump, would want to have any kinetic actions now, but it could be immediate, hard sanctions on Iran, and maybe much more than the maximum sanctions, maybe on secondary sanctions on the purchase of their oil. And the other thing that people talk about, would this be a path in exchange that if Israel continues withdrawing from Gaza, can this lead quickly to a normalization with the Saudis? But the Saudis are going to demand some path for the Palestinians. I think that could be dealt with. So we're talking about, can Bibi look past the short term as a great leader and give up things that are almost impossible to believe, where Hamas will come out looking like a victor, at least initially, for maybe withdrawing the Middle East, and if not on a map, but as part of shared interests and alliances. So there are many dimensions of what's going on here. So when Witkoff, the president's Middle East Special Middle East envoy, comes and meets with Bibi tomorrow and goes and begins phase 2, he's got to realize there are so many moving parts here, and hopefully they can all be coordinated during this trip. By the way, Bibi is meeting not only with Trump and Witkoff, he's going to meeting with Rubio, Waltz, a national security advisor, with Hesketh, the Department of Defense and head of Department of Defense, and also congressional leaders. So getting everybody aligned here is incredibly important. So it's really going to see what Bibi's vision is. The coalition may fall, but he would be supported, at least temporarily, by the opposition. We'll have to see how Bibi plays this, because hopefully that he will choose Israel and the United States' interests before any personal interests of keeping the coalition together.
So is it still too soon to start speaking about Saudi normalization with Israel at this stage?
It shouldn't be too soon, and the president is going to be dangling that in front of Bibi, saying, you're going to have to play ball with me here, because I've personally invested in making sure that this war will end. And President Trump does not want to look like this was a failure. And so Saudi normalization, I think, needs to move quickly. Here's the problem. Hamas, in part, started October 7th to destroy the Saudi normalization. So if normalization proceeds quickly, what will Hamas do? What will Iran do? Remember, what America is trying to do is change the Middle East from an Iranian Shiite hegemonic domination to a U.S.-aligned Saudi domination of the region. Let's leave the Turks aside for a second. And so in changing that, if the president has a grand plan here, Saudi normalization can't be just keep dangled. There needs to be some speaking between the Israelis, the Saudis, and the Americans starting ASAP.
But in the meantime, Trump has doubled down on his controversial idea to relocate Gazans to Egypt and Jordan. So how does that work in the grand scheme of including Saudi Arabia into the what would be an expanded Abraham Accords?
So the president is known, if you read The Art of the Deal, about hyperbole and exaggeration. So I think people would give him a pass of the ones who can't tolerate that in the Middle East. Having said that, the president's idea, when you look at it logically, objectively, the idea of moving Gazans even temporarily elsewhere is not a bad deal, because this area cannot be rebuilt. We're not talking about a year or two. We're talking about a decade, because not only do you have to get rid of this tremendous demolition site, you also have to dig up all the tunnels that are underneath of there. So at this point of time, the one thing Israel should not be allowing is the rebuilding of Gaza as part of any type of deal here, because that will just be another victory of Hamas. It's one thing to withdraw the troops, and the troops could go back in theory, but to start rebuilding Gaza before the next phases happen, I don't think there should be any rebuilding until this Saudi-Israeli normalization.
All right, we'll definitely be keeping an eye out for those updates coming out of that meeting. Eric Mendel, thank you for joining me.
Thank you for having me.